Good evening, night owls, and welcome to Whisper Crowley. Tonight, I will guide you into a world of darkness, hoping to help you relax and unwind. Perhaps some of you will even drift into a haunting yet soothing sleep. Before we begin, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. And now we begin. Have you ever felt the weight of the past pressing down on you, like a shadow that refuses to let go? The question hung in the air, drawing the attention of the guests at Moonlight Club, an open-air venue nestled under the starlit California sky. The club was known for its ethereal ambience and the soft glow of lanterns swaying gently in the night breeze. Yet tonight, a palpable tension vibrated in the atmosphere, as if something unseen was lurking just beyond the flickering light. I leaned against the wooden railing, staring into the distance where the trees swayed softly. It was here, beneath the full moon, that people gathered, captivated by stories of the past. As I watched couples laughing and whispering, I felt a chill creep up my spine. Something wasn't right. The first time I noticed it, I dismissed it as a trick of the mind. A silhouette flickering in the corner of my vision, vanishing as I turned my head. But tonight, the feeling was different. There was a presence that enveloped the club, something dark and ancient that seemed to weave itself into the fabric of the evening. As I scanned the crowd, my eyes fell upon a figure standing just beyond the reach of the moonlight. A man dressed in an old-fashioned suit, his features obscured by the shadows. He stood still as if carved from the night itself. I felt my heart race. The stories I had heard whispered about this place rushed back to me. They spoke of a ghostly man who appeared only when the moon was full, watching the revelers with a melancholic gaze. Was he real, or merely a figment of our collective imagination, conjured by tales spun around campfires? As I turned back to my friends, I could still feel his gaze, heavy and unyielding. The music swelled, but it only deepened the unsettling silence that accompanied the figure. A sudden rustle of leaves broke my concentration. I jerked my head in that direction, but there was nothing, only the low murmur of the crowd and the soft clinking of glasses. "Are you okay?" a voice interrupted my thoughts. It was Maya, her brow furrowed with concern. "You look pale." "I'm fine," I lied, forcing a smile. "Just a bit tired." But my mind was racing. The longer I stood there, the more I felt the tension in the air build. It was as if the shadows themselves were shifting, watching, waiting. As the moon rose higher in the sky, illuminating the clearing with a ghostly glow, I noticed the figure again. He hadn't moved, yet something felt different. There was an intensity to his presence that was impossible to ignore. I felt drawn to him, as if he were calling to me from the depths of time. "Let's go dance," Maya exclaimed, pulling me away from my thoughts. I nodded, but my gaze remained fixed on the man. I could see him clearer now. His suit was old-fashioned, frayed at the edges, and his eyes, oh, those eyes, held a depth of sorrow that pierced through the night. As we swayed to the music, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen. I stole glances back at the man, but he was still there, an anchor in a storm of laughter and light. Then the music abruptly cut out, plunging the clearing into a silence so thick it felt suffocating. I turned to Maya, confusion etched on her face, but before I could speak, a low rumble echoed through the night. It was a sound unlike anything I had ever heard, a haunting melody woven with despair. My heart raced. People started murmuring, shifting uneasily. I felt a cold sweat break out across my forehead. The shadows seemed to deepen, curling around the edges of the clearing like tendrils of smoke. "What's happening?" Maya asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know," I stammered, my eyes fixed on the figure. He was still standing there, but now he seemed to shimmer, a flickering mirage in the moonlight. The air grew heavy, thick with an energy I couldn't understand. Then a scream shattered the silence. A woman stood at the edge of the clearing, her face ashen, pointing into the trees. "Something is out there." Panic erupted among the guests, laughter turned to chaos. People scrambled for the exit, their faces pale with fear. I felt my breath quicken as I turned back to the figure. He had taken a step forward, as if drawn to the chaos unfolding before him. "Stay close," I shouted to Maya, gripping her hand tightly. I could feel her trembling, her eyes wide with terror. The shadows were alive now, twisting and writhing, a dark force pushing against the light. The man's form flickered again, and for a moment I could see something behind him, something lurking just out of sight, something that made my skin crawl. "Run," I urged Maya, but my feet felt rooted to the ground. I needed to understand. I needed to know what he was. With a sudden surge of bravery, I stepped forward, calling out to him. "Who are you?" The man's gaze turned to me, and in that instant, I felt the weight of his sorrow wash over me like a tidal wave. "I cannot leave," he said, his voice echoing through the clearing, filled with a haunting sadness. "This is where I lived and died. I am bound to this place, to the moments that defined me." Before I could respond, a shadow broke free from the trees. It lunged toward the crowd, and I saw it, a creature twisted and grotesque, with eyes that glowed like embers. It moved with a speed that sent shockwaves of terror through my body. "Get back," I screamed, pulling Maya closer. The creature was coming for us, drawn by the chaos, the fear. As I backed away, the man in the suit raised his hand, a desperate look in his eyes. "You must go. This place is cursed. You cannot stay." But it was too late. The darkness was closing in, and I felt the icy grip of fear tighten around my throat. We were trapped in a nightmare, caught between the living and the dead, where shadows danced and history bled into the present. "Run," I screamed again, shoving Maya ahead of me as I braced myself for the inevitable. And as the chaos unfolded, I realized that the moonlight might not be enough to save us from the horrors lurking just beneath the surface. The moment we turned to run, the air felt charged, thick with an energy that made every hair on my body stand on end. I could hear the chaos unfolding around us, the frantic footsteps of our fellow guests, their panicked breaths, and the haunting echoes of that creature's guttural growls. Each sound melded into a cacophony that threatened to drown us. I tugged at Maya's hand, urgency propelling us forward. The moon hung high, illuminating the path ahead, but its light felt inadequate against the encroaching darkness. With every step, I could feel the shadows closing in, whispering secrets I was not meant to hear. My heart raced, pounding in my chest like a drum urging us to escape. "Where do we go?" Maya shouted, her voice laced with desperation. "Just keep running," I replied, glancing back briefly. The man in the suit had vanished, leaving behind only a lingering sensation of loss and regret. But the creature was not far behind, its eyes glowing ominously, a predator drawn to our fear. We stumbled toward the exit of the clearing, the trees looming like sentinels. I could feel the underbrush scratching at my legs, pulling me back, as if the very earth wanted to keep us ensnared in its grasp. With every stride, I felt a surge of adrenaline propelling me forward, but doubt gnawed at the edges of my resolve. What was this place? Why had we come here? Look, Maya yelled, pointing toward a narrow path leading into the woods. It seemed darker than the rest of the forest, an invitation wrapped in dread. But we had no choice. The sounds of the creature grew louder, more frantic, and instinct kicked in survival. We dashed into the underbrush, the world around us transforming into a blur of shadows and moonlight. Branches scratched our skin, and the scent of damp earth filled my lungs. It felt as if the forest itself was alive, shifting, breathing around us. I could hear the rustle of leaves, almost like whispers, and my mind raced with questions. What was lurking in the depths of this forest? What awaited us in the dark? As we navigated through the tangled branches, I could feel the presence of the creature behind us, a dark shadow trailing our every move. My thoughts spiraled into a whirlwind of panic and confusion. I recalled the stories of the ghostly man and the legend of this cursed land. They had seemed like mere tales, but now they felt like a warning we had ignored. Maya, we need to find somewhere safe, I gasped, glancing back to see if the creature was still on our heels. The darkness seemed to pulse, hungry for our fear. We stumbled upon a small clearing, a faint glimmer of moonlight breaking through the trees. In the center lay an old stone structure, half buried in moss and vines. It looked ancient, like a forgotten relic of a time long past. Instinctively, I felt drawn to it, a sanctuary amid the chaos. "Do you think it's safe?" Maya asked, her voice trembling. "Better than out there," I replied, urgency in my tone. We rushed toward the structure, our hearts pounding in sync. As we approached, the moonlight cast eerie shadows against the weathered stones, creating a tapestry of light and dark that sent chills down my spine. Inside, the air was cool and damp. A faint echo of water dripping somewhere within the shadows filled the silence, almost rhythmic, like a heartbeat. The walls were adorned with faded carvings, symbols I couldn't decipher, but they felt heavy with meaning. They whispered secrets of a time when this place was alive with purpose, not just a hiding spot for lost souls. "Maya, we need to look around," I said, scanning the interior. I stepped further in, feeling the cool stone beneath my fingers, tracing the carvings. Maybe there's a way out. As we explored, I noticed a sense of unease creeping in. It was as if the stones themselves were watching us, the air thick with an energy that felt almost sentient. I could hear faint murmurs, indistinct and haunting. Were they remnants of the past? Echoes of those who had come before us? Then a noise broke through the silence. A low growl reverberated from outside the structure. My heart sank. The creature had found us. I turned to Maya, her eyes wide with fear, and felt a surge of determination. "We need to barricade the entrance," I said urgently. Together we pushed against the heavy stone door, wedging it with fallen branches and debris. The growling intensified, punctuated by the scratching sounds of claws against the earth. The creature was relentless, driven by an instinct to hunt. As we leaned against the door, panting, I caught a glimpse of something glimmering in the corner of the room. It was an old lantern covered in dust. Look, I shouted, rushing toward it. I fumbled with the mechanism, finally igniting it. A warm glow filled the room, chasing away some of the shadows. Maya, come here, I beckoned, and she hurried to my side. We both stood in the flickering light, our breaths heavy with fear. What do we do now? She whispered, glancing nervously at the door. Maybe we can find a way to fight back, I suggested, scanning the room for anything that could help. My eyes fell upon a series of old tools hanging on the wall, their metal surfaces dulled by time. There were shovels, picks, and something that looked like a makeshift weapon, a heavy iron rod. I grabbed the rod and handed it to Maya. If it comes in, we need to defend ourselves. We can't just wait here to be hunted. She nodded, her face resolute. But even as I spoke, a sinking feeling settled in my stomach. What were we dealing with? Was it truly a creature of flesh and bone, or something darker, a manifestation of the fears that had haunted this place for centuries? The growling outside grew louder, reverberating through the walls of our temporary refuge. I glanced at the entrance, my heart pounding in my chest. We were cornered, and the only thing standing between us and the unknown was a fragile door and our determination. Maya, if it gets in, we fight. No matter what, I said, my voice firm despite the fear swirling within me. Just then, a loud crash echoed through the clearing. The door shook violently as something slammed against it. The growling morphed into a chilling roar, and I could feel the vibrations of its anger resonating through the stone. Get ready, I shouted, positioning myself beside the door, the iron rod clutched tightly in my hands. As the door rattled once more, I knew we had entered a confrontation that would determine our fates. The shadows were closing in, but we would not go down without a fight. The door shuddered again, the growl outside rising to a bone-chilling crescendo. My heart raced as I braced myself, my grip tightening around the iron rod. I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins, heightening every sense, sharpening my focus. Maya, stand behind me, I commanded, stepping forward to shield her. The flickering lantern cast dancing shadows on the walls, warping the space around us into something otherworldly. Each pulse of light felt like a countdown to whatever horror awaited on the other side. With a thunderous crash, the door splintered and the creature pushed through, its form emerging from the shadows. It was larger than I had imagined, muscles rippling beneath matted fur, its eyes glowing like embers in the dark. The moonlight barely penetrated the gloom, but even in the dim light, its jagged teeth shone like daggers. I could feel a wave of dread wash over me, a primal fear that gripped my stomach. This was no ordinary creature. It felt ancient, as if it had roamed these woods long before humanity had dared to tread. Stay back, I shouted, raising the iron rod as a makeshift weapon. The creature paused, its eyes narrowing as it regarded us. I could see the intelligence in its gaze, the recognition of prey that had turned to fight. Maya clutched my arm, her breathing quickening as the creature took a cautious step forward. The growl morphed into a low, rumbling snarl, echoing through the stone walls. The air crackled with tension, thick and suffocating. I could feel the weight of history pressing down on us, as if the very stones of the structure were holding their breath in anticipation. I remembered the legends, the tales of those who had come before us, drawn into the darkness of these woods. Had they faced this same creature? Had they cowered in fear, or had they fought back? I couldn't let the stories end with us. Not like this. Maya, if it charges, aim for the eyes, I instructed, my voice steady despite the terror swirling in my mind. She nodded, determination etched on her face. The creature lunged, muscles coiling like springs. I swung the rod with all my might, catching it across the snout. The impact sent a shockwave through my arms, but it only seemed to enrage the beast. It let out a ferocious howl, a sound that reverberated through the structure and sent a tremor through my bones. Maya took the opportunity to strike, aiming for its eyes. But the creature dodged, its speed astonishing. It was upon us in an instant, its massive frame barreling forward. I could feel the heat radiating from its body as I ducked just in time, narrowly avoiding its snapping jaws. "Keep moving," I shouted, my heart pounding like a war drum. We dodged to the side, barely escaping the creature's charge. The lantern flickered wildly, casting erratic shadows that danced across the walls. With each passing moment, I felt our chances of survival slipping away. The creature circled us, its growls resonating in my chest. I could see the hunger in its eyes, the primal instinct to hunt. We were trapped, and it was only a matter of time before it found an opening. Over there, Maya pointed to a small alcove in the corner of the structure, partially concealed by overgrown vines. "We can hide." "Go," I urged, shoving her gently toward the opening. I needed to buy us time. The creature lunged again, and I swung the rod, connecting with its shoulder. It stumbled slightly but quickly regained its footing, fury evident in its growl. I dove toward the alcove just as the creature turned its attention back to me. In that moment, I felt a surge of desperation and resolve. I couldn't let it take Maya. I couldn't let it take us both. As I ducked into the alcove, I could hear the heavy thud of the creature's paws on the stone floor. The air was thick with fear, but I forced myself to focus. I had to find something, anything that could turn the tide. My eyes scanned the dark corners of the alcove, searching for a weapon or a tool. There, in the shadows, lay a rusted dagger, its blade dulled but still sharp enough to do damage. I grasped it, feeling the weight of the metal in my hand. The creature's growls grew closer, echoing ominously. I could sense its presence just outside, waiting for the chance to pounce. "Stay back," I shouted again, my voice wavering but firm. I peeked around the edge of the alcove, catching a glimpse of the beast as it prowled near the entrance, its breath heavy and ragged. It was a predator, poised and ready to strike. "Maya, are you okay?" I whispered, turning to check on her. She was pressed against the back of the alcove, her eyes wide with fear but fierce with determination. "I'm fine," she replied, her voice steadier than I felt. "What's the plan?" "We wait for it to come in," I said, my heart racing. "Then we strike. We can't let it corner us again." As we crouched in the shadows, the tension in the air grew palpable. The creature's growls shifted to a low, menacing sound, as if it was mocking us. I could feel the fear creeping back in, clawing at my resolve. What if we didn't survive this? What if this was where our story ended? But I couldn't let those thoughts take hold. I had to believe we could fight back. Suddenly the creature lunged toward the alcove, its massive jaws snapping dangerously close. I could feel the rush of wind as it charged, instinct kicking in. I thrust the dagger forward, aiming for its throat. The blade found its mark, and the creature let out a piercing scream that reverberated through the stone structure. It staggered back, blood oozing from the wound, and for a brief moment I saw uncertainty in its eyes. "Now," I shouted, rushing out of the alcove. Maya followed, and together we pressed the advantage. I swung the dagger again, landing another blow, but the creature was resilient, its fury igniting a primal rage. We fought, dodging its attacks, striking whenever we could. The world around us became a blur of shadows and chaos, the lantern flickering wildly, casting erratic patterns of light. With each moment I could feel our strength waning, but we couldn't give up. This wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a battle against the darkness that had plagued this place for too long. "Maya, we can't let it win," I yelled, my voice a mix of desperation and determination. Together we struck again, our movements fueled by fear and adrenaline. The creature roared, thrashing wildly as we landed blow after blow. I could feel the tide turning, our resolve pushing us forward. And then, just as quickly as it had begun, the creature faltered. It let out a final, desperate growl, stumbling back, its eyes wide with confusion and rage. In that moment, I knew we had a chance. We pressed forward, forcing the creature into a corner. It was now or never. I raised the dagger high, and with a final surge of strength, I plunged it deep into the creature's heart. The air was still. For a heartbeat, time seemed to freeze. The creature's eyes locked onto mine, a mixture of pain and disbelief crossing its face. Then it collapsed, a heavy thud echoing through the stone walls as the life drained from its body. I stood there breathless, my heart pounding in my chest. We had done it. We had fought back against the darkness. But as I looked down at the creature, a chilling thought settled in my mind. What else lurked in these shadows? What other secrets lay hidden within the depths of this ancient place? "Maya," I began, but the words caught in my throat. Suddenly, a soft whisper filled the air, an echo of voices that seemed to rise from the very stones around us. They wrapped around us, chilling my bones, drawing me back into the depths of the unknown. What have we awakened? I wondered, my mind racing. But even as doubt gnawed at my resolve, I knew one thing: this was only the beginning. The shadows held many secrets, and we were far from safe. The air felt heavy around us, thick with an unsettling silence that enveloped the aftermath of our battle. I stood over the fallen creature, my chest heaving as adrenaline surged through my veins. The smell of blood mixed with damp earth, a pungent reminder of our narrow escape. But in that moment of triumph, a deeper unease clawed at my mind. "Maya," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "we need to get out of here." I glanced around, my senses on high alert. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed to writhe, as if alive, watching us. She nodded, her face pale but determined. "But what about?" "Later," I interrupted, cutting off her question. "We can't stay here." I could feel it. The air was charged with an ancient energy, a tension that pulsed like a heartbeat, a reminder that we were not alone. I stepped cautiously toward the exit, the lantern flickering dimly, casting eerie shapes on the stone walls. Each step felt like a countdown, a reminder that the darkness outside might hold threats even more sinister than the creature we had just faced. As we approached the door, a low hum began to resonate through the walls. It was soft at first, almost like the sound of distant chanting, but it grew louder, echoing around us in a language I couldn't comprehend. I turned to Maya, my heart pounding. "Do you hear that?" I asked, my voice shaking slightly. "Yes," she replied, her brow furrowed in confusion. "What is it?" I couldn't answer. The sound seemed to seep into my bones, stirring something deep within me. It felt ancient, primal, as if it was awakening a memory long buried. My instincts screamed for us to flee, but a strange compulsion rooted me to the spot. "Maya, we have to go now," I urged, my voice rising in urgency. But she was staring at the walls, captivated by the whispers that seemed to swirl around us like mist. "Wait," she said softly. "Listen." As if compelled by her words, I strained to hear, trying to separate the sounds from the chaos in my mind. The chanting grew clearer, a rhythmic cadence that pulsed like a drum beat. I felt it resonate through my chest, an echo of something that had been lost to time. And then I saw it, a shimmer at the edge of my vision, a flicker of movement within the shadows. My heart raced as I turned, but there was nothing there, just the oppressive darkness of the chamber. "Let's go," I shouted, grasping her arm and pulling her toward the door. The sound intensified, reverberating through the stone structure, almost mocking our fear. The whispers seemed to coil around us, drawing closer, and I felt the chill of dread settle in the pit of my stomach. With one final push, I flung the door open, and we burst into the night air. The moon hung high above, illuminating the woods with a silvery glow. The calm of the outside world felt surreal after the chaos we had just endured. But the whispers followed us, fading into the rustling leaves and the distant hoot of an owl. "Where do we go now?" Maya asked, her voice trembling slightly. I looked around, trying to gauge our surroundings. The path before us was overgrown, twisting into the woods like a dark vein. "We need to find a way back to the campus," I replied, glancing back toward the entrance of the structure, half expecting the creature to emerge from the shadows. But nothing followed. The darkness remained still, as if holding its breath. As we walked deeper into the woods, the weight of silence pressed in around us. The whispers had subsided, but the sense of unease lingered. I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end, as if we were being watched by unseen eyes. "Maya, do you think it's really over?" I asked, glancing at her. Her expression was thoughtful, shadowed by worry. "I don't know," she admitted. "What if there are more of them? Or something even worse?" The thought chilled me. "We need to stick together," I said firmly, trying to keep my voice steady. "Whatever happens, we'll face it together." We trudged through the underbrush, the sounds of the forest enveloping us. Every crack of a twig or rustle of leaves sent my heart racing. The shadows seemed to stretch and twist, playing tricks on my mind. I couldn't shake the feeling that the woods were alive, hiding secrets just out of reach. As we navigated the tangled paths, I recalled the legends I had heard about this place, the whispers of a cult that once roamed these woods, performing dark rituals long forgotten. Had we stumbled upon something far more sinister than just a creature? Were there forces at play that we couldn't even begin to understand? Suddenly the ground beneath us shifted. A low rumble echoed through the trees, causing the leaves to tremble. I froze, my instincts screaming at me to run, but I couldn't move. "Maya, did you feel that?" I whispered, my eyes scanning the darkness. "Yes," she replied, her voice barely audible. What is happening? Before I could respond, a blinding flash of light erupted from the depths of the forest, illuminating the night. It was a dazzling burst of energy, illuminating the trees around us in stark relief. The light danced and flickered, revealing shapes and figures that seemed to swirl within it, shadows moving in sync with the pulsating glow. "What is that?" I gasped, squinting against the brightness. "It looks like some kind of ritual," Maya suggested, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and fascination. We inched closer, curiosity battling with caution. The air felt charged, electric, as the light pulsated, drawing us in. I could feel the pull of it, an urge to step forward and discover what lay within the brilliance. But a sense of dread loomed over us, whispering warnings. I hesitated, torn between the allure of the light and the instinct to flee. "Maya, we need to be careful," I cautioned. "This could be a trap." Just as I spoke, the ground beneath our feet trembled violently. I stumbled, grabbing Maya to steady us both. The light flared brighter, and the whispers returned, louder now, swirling around us like a tempest. The shadows writhed, and suddenly figures emerged from the light, cloaked in dark robes, their faces obscured. They moved with purpose, chanting in a language that sent chills down my spine. "We should go," I urged, fear flooding my veins. But Maya stood rooted to the spot, her eyes locked onto the figures. "Oh, wait, they might know what's going on. They could help us. No, they could be the reason all this is happening," I shouted, tugging at her arm. In that moment the chanting crescendoed and the figures turned toward us, their voices rising in a haunting harmony. The air thickened and I felt an overwhelming force wash over us, a dark energy that felt suffocating. "Maya, please," I pleaded, desperation creeping into my voice. But it was too late. The figures extended their hands toward us, and in an instant the light surged forward, enveloping us in a blinding glow. I felt myself being pulled, drawn into the brilliance, the whispers intensifying as the darkness closed in around us. In that moment I realized we were no longer in control. The shadows had found us again, and there was no escape. The blinding light enveloped us completely, drowning out the forest, the trees, and the very air around us. I felt an overwhelming force pressing against my body, as if the light itself were trying to pull me apart. My heart raced, panic surging through my veins. I was acutely aware of Maya beside me, her presence a tether in this chaotic maelstrom. "Maya," I shouted, but the sound felt swallowed by the brilliance. I reached for her hand, desperately seeking a connection in this swirling void. Then, just as abruptly as it had begun, the light flickered, revealing a different world. We were no longer in the woods. We stood in a vast chamber, the walls adorned with ancient symbols that glowed faintly, illuminating the space with an eerie light. The air was thick with a palpable energy, vibrating as if the very stones were alive. Before us, the cloaked figures stood in a circle, their voices melding into a rhythmic chant that resonated in my bones. Each syllable dripped with an ancient power, echoing the secrets of the ages. The ground beneath us pulsed in time with their words, and I could feel the vibrations travel through my feet, sending shivers up my spine. "Maya, we need to get out of here," I whispered urgently, my instincts screaming at me to flee. But my voice felt small against the rising tide of their chant, lost in the storm of sound that enveloped us. She turned to me, eyes wide with both fear and fascination. "What are they doing?" This is incredible. I shook my head, unwilling to let curiosity overcome caution. No, it's dangerous. We don't know what they want. Suddenly, one of the figures stepped forward, the hood falling back to reveal a face twisted with age and wisdom. Deep-set eyes, black as coal, bore into mine, and I felt an unsettling connection, as if they were searching for something buried within me. "Welcome, travelers," the figure intoned, their voice a low, resonant echo. "You have been chosen to witness the rites of the shadows. You stand at the threshold of knowledge and power." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. I felt a pull and a lure to step closer, to understand, but fear gnawed at my insides. "What knowledge? What power?" I managed to stammer, my voice barely rising above the chant. The figure raised a hand, silencing the others with a gesture. "Long have we awaited the return of the chosen. The balance must be restored, and you possess the key." I exchanged a glance with Maya, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. "Oh, the key? What do you mean?" "The darkness that seeks to envelop this world requires a vessel. Only by embracing the shadows can true power be attained," the figure explained, their voice smooth yet filled with an unsettling edge. I felt a cold chill creep up my spine. "And what happens to us?" "Your sacrifice will ensure the continuation of our legacy," they replied, the words echoing like a death knell in the chamber. Panic surged within me. "No, we won't be your sacrifices," I shouted, pulling Maya closer. "We're not part of this." The figure's expression shifted, the faintest hint of a smile curling their lips. "It is too late for that. The shadows have chosen you." With that, the chamber darkened, the glow from the symbols dimming as the figures closed in around us, their chants rising in a frenzied pitch. The energy in the room crackled, an electric tension that made the hair on my arms stand on end. "Maya, we need to find a way out," I urged, scanning the perimeter of the chamber. My mind raced, looking for any escape route, but the walls loomed high and unyielding. "Look," she exclaimed, pointing to a distant archway where a flicker of light danced. "There's an exit." Without waiting for a response, I seized her hand and we dashed toward the archway, heart pounding in sync with the chant. The figures seemed to pulse around us, their voices mingling into a cacophony that echoed off the walls. But just as we reached the archway, a figure lunged forward, blocking our path. Their eyes glinted with a feral hunger. "You cannot leave. The ritual demands completion." I felt the floor tremble beneath us, a reminder of the power at play. "Maya now," I shouted, adrenaline propelling us forward. We pushed past the figure, my shoulder colliding with theirs, sending a jolt of energy through my body. For a moment everything seemed to freeze, the chanting halted, the world stood still, and then the chaos erupted. As we burst through the archway, the chamber behind us ignited in a blinding flash. I could feel the heat on my back, the energy shifting, pulling at me like a riptide. "Maya, keep going," I urged, dragging her along as we stumbled into the next corridor. The air was cooler here, the silence profound, but I could still hear the echoes of the chant reverberating behind us. We ran through the twisting passageways, each step feeling heavier as if the shadows themselves were clawing at our heels. The walls were lined with the same symbols we had seen before, their glow now dimmed, almost mocking us. "What if they follow us?" Maya gasped, glancing back nervously. They can't. We have to keep moving, I urged, fear lending urgency to my words. We turned another corner, my heart racing as I sought an exit, any exit. The passageway began to narrow, the air growing stifling. I could hear the whispers return, wrapping around us like smoke. The energy of the chamber lingered in my veins, and I fought against it, pushing forward. Suddenly we burst into another room, a smaller chamber lit by the soft glow of phosphorescent fungi that clung to the damp walls. In the center lay a pedestal, intricately carved and adorned with strange artifacts. Look, Maya breathed, stepping closer. I felt the pull of the artifacts, a magnetic force that seemed to beckon us. No, we can't get distracted. We need to find a way out, I insisted, but she was already moving toward the pedestal. Oh, wait, these might help us, she called back, her fingers brushing against a shimmering amulet. Before I could respond, a surge of energy pulsed through the room, and the air crackled with intensity. The shadows coalesced, forming shapes that danced just out of view, whispering in a language I couldn't comprehend. Maya, I shouted, panic rising in my chest. We have to leave now. But she turned, the amulet clasped tightly in her hand. Oh, this is it. This could be our way to stop them. Stop what? I asked, but the shadows were closing in, a dark tide ready to swallow us whole. Maya, please, I pleaded, desperation clawing at my throat. The whispers escalated into a crescendo, drowning out my words. The air grew heavier, filled with a dark promise that set my teeth on edge. I felt the weight of unseen eyes pressing in from every direction, the darkness hungry for our fear. And in that moment, as the shadows converged, I realized the truth. We were not just running from them. We were entangled in their story, drawn into a narrative far greater than ourselves. The whispers of the shadows were not just a threat. They were a call, an invitation to become part of something ancient and terrifying. Maya, I shouted again, the urgency in my voice cutting through the chaos. Whatever happens, stay with me. But as the shadows surged, pulling us into their depths, I knew that our fates had already been entwined, and the true ritual was just beginning. I hope you enjoyed the first story. If you did, don't forget to leave a like, but if I didn't do my job well, feel free to give it a thumbs down. Either way, drop a comment and let us know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Now, let's continue. What would you do if you heard a phone ringing in a house that had been abandoned for years? The question lingered in my mind like a dark cloud as I parked my car in front of the old house. It loomed before me, an ominous silhouette against the fading Texas sun. The peeling paint and cracked windows whispered stories of neglect, and yet curiosity pulled me closer. I had received a call earlier that day, an invitation to show the property. The voice on the other end was smooth, almost melodic, but there was something unsettling about it, a hint of urgency that made my skin crawl. As I stepped out of my car, a chill settled in the air, prickling the back of my neck. I glanced around. The street was empty, silent except for the faint rustle of leaves in the wind. The house stood alone, a relic from another time, and I couldn't shake the feeling that it was watching me. The door was ajar, creaking softly as it swayed in the breeze. I took a deep breath, reminding myself of my duty as a realtor, and pushed it open wider. The interior was dim, shadows clinging to the corners like secrets. Dust motes floated in the beams of light filtering through the grime-covered windows. The air smelled stale, tinged with the faint scent of mildew. I stepped inside, the floorboards groaning beneath my weight, echoing in the silence. Then I heard it. A phone ringing. The sound seemed to emanate from deep within the house, an anachronistic call in a world where landlines had long been forgotten. I paused, heart racing. No one should be in here. The phone lines had been cut off years ago, or so I had been told. "Hello," I called out, my voice trembling slightly as it bounced off the walls. No response. Just the persistent ringing, urging me forward. I hesitated, glancing around the room. An old fireplace dominated one wall, the mantel cluttered with dusty relics, faded photographs, a broken clock, and a small porcelain figurine that seemed to stare back at me with hollow eyes. A strange sense of foreboding washed over me. The ringing continued, insistent and eerie. Against my better judgment, I followed the sound down a narrow hallway. Each step felt heavy, as if the house itself were trying to pull me back. The walls were lined with peeling wallpaper, patterns of faded flowers twisting and turning into shapes that played tricks on my mind. As I walked deeper into the house, the atmosphere shifted. A draft swept through the hallway, and I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air. It was as if something were moving just out of sight. I turned, half expecting to see someone standing behind me, but the hallway was empty, the shadows stretching and writhing like living things. The phone rang again, and I quickened my pace. I reached a door at the end of the hall, its surface worn and scratched. The sound was louder now, reverberating through my bones. I placed a hand on the doorknob, hesitation flooding me. What was on the other side? I twisted the knob and the door creaked open. The room was smaller, cluttered with forgotten furniture shrouded in dust. In the corner, an old rotary phone sat atop a rickety table, its cord twisted and frayed. The ringing continued, echoing in the silence. I approached it slowly, every instinct telling me to turn back, to flee from this place. I reached for the receiver, my hand shaking. As I lifted it, the ringing stopped, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. My heart raced in the quiet, pounding in my ears. "Hello," I whispered into the receiver, my voice barely above a breath. Static crackled, a low hum that sent a shiver down my spine. I felt the air around me thicken, the room closing in, shadows deepening. Then through the static, a voice emerged, soft, almost a whisper, but laced with urgency. "Help me." The words echoed in my mind, wrapping around me like a vice. Panic surged as I dropped the receiver, stumbling back. I wanted to run, to escape the suffocating weight of the moment. But something held me there, a dark compulsion urging me to understand. "Who are you?" I managed to choke out, but the room responded only with silence, the shadows creeping closer. As I backed away, the phone began to ring again, this time louder, more insistent. It pulsed with a life of its own, filling the room with a frantic energy. My breath quickened and I turned to flee, but the shadows shifted, coalescing into shapes that seemed to whisper my name. Suddenly, the air grew heavy, and I felt the presence of something beyond the veil of the ordinary. An icy breeze swept through the room, extinguishing the last rays of daylight that had crept through the window. The darkness engulfed me, and I could almost hear the whispers of those who had come before, trapped, forgotten, begging for release. I bolted back down the hallway, the oppressive weight of the house closing in around me. I could feel their eyes watching, could sense their desperation. The door at the entrance loomed ahead, but it felt impossibly far. The phone rang again, a final, desperate plea. "Help me," the voice echoed in my mind, intertwining with my own fear. I burst through the door and into the fading light of the Texas evening, my heart racing, breath coming in gasps. The world outside felt surreal, as if I had stepped back into a reality I no longer recognized. But the feeling of being watched lingered, a weight I couldn't shake. I stumbled to my car, glancing back at the house, its windows dark and empty, yet somehow alive. As I drove away, the sound of that phone ringing haunted me, echoing in my mind, a call from the empty house that I knew I couldn't ignore. The shadows had awakened something in me, a curiosity, a dread, and I knew I would have to return. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had left something behind. The ringing phone echoed in my mind, a haunting melody that twisted itself around my thoughts, refusing to let go. I parked my car a few blocks away, heart racing as I walked back toward the house. The sun dipped lower on the horizon, casting long shadows that seemed to reach out, inviting me to turn back, but I pressed on. The moment I stood before the door again, I felt that familiar chill. The air was thick, heavy with an unseen weight. I hesitated for a moment, glancing over my shoulder as if expecting someone to follow me, but the street remained empty and silent. Taking a deep breath, I pushed the door open once more. Inside, the house was cloaked in darkness, the fading light barely penetrating the gloom. The atmosphere felt alive, a palpable energy humming just beneath the surface. My heart pounded in my chest as I stepped across the threshold, memories of the chilling voice flooding back. "Help me." I moved cautiously, retracing my steps down the hallway. The shadows danced along the walls, twisting and shifting in a way that made me question my sanity. Every creak of the floorboards beneath me sounded amplified, echoing through the silence like a warning. I reached the room with the rotary phone, my breath quickening as I remembered the urgency in that voice. The room was unchanged, yet something felt different. The air was thick with anticipation, like the moments before a storm. I approached the table, my heart racing with trepidation. The phone sat there still, its surface dusty but oddly pristine, as if it had been waiting for me. "Hello," I whispered again, not expecting a response but hoping for some clarity. The stillness was unnerving, and I felt a cold sweat break out along my spine. Suddenly the phone rang, shattering the silence. The sound reverberated through the room, and I jumped back, my heart racing. I had to answer it. Against my better judgment, I picked up the receiver, my fingers trembling. "Hello," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Help me," the voice was clearer this time, laced with desperation. It sent a chill coursing through me. "You have to find me. I can't escape." "Who are you?" I pressed, my heart pounding in my ears. "I am trapped. They won't let me go. You must hurry before it's too late." Panic surged within me, and I glanced around the room, as if expecting to see something lurking in the shadows. "What do you mean? Who won't let you go?" "They are watching. Always watching." "You must come to the cellar," the voice implored, trembling with urgency. "The door is hidden. They cannot know you are here. Please, you are my only hope." The call ended abruptly and the phone went silent. I felt an electric jolt of fear wash over me. What's that? I hadn't noticed one before. The urgency in the voice echoed in my mind, stirring something deep within me, a mix of fear and determination. I set the receiver down and glanced around the room, my mind racing. If there was a hidden cellar, it had to be nearby. I scanned the walls for any sign of a door or trap, my fingers brushing against the peeling wallpaper. My heart raced as I noticed a slight bulge in the wall behind the table. I pressed my palm against it, feeling for any give. It felt wrong, out of place. A faint click echoed as I pushed, and part of the wall swung inward, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. A wave of dread washed over me, but the urgency in that voice spurred me on. I couldn't turn back now. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what lay ahead. I grabbed my phone from my pocket, turning on the flashlight feature. The beam of light pierced the darkness as I began my descent, each step creaking beneath my weight. The air grew cooler as I moved deeper into the cellar, the atmosphere thickening with every step. The walls were damp and a musty smell filled my nostrils. Shadows flickered in the corners of my vision, but I forced myself to push forward. The voice had been desperate, and I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was counting on me. At the bottom of the stairs, the beam of my flashlight revealed a small, cramped space. The walls were lined with old crates and debris, remnants of a time long past. I turned, scanning the area for any signs of movement. The oppressive silence weighed heavily on me. "Hello," I called out, my voice trembling as it echoed through the dark. "Nothing." I stepped further in, my heart pounding in my chest. In the far corner, something glinted in the light. I approached cautiously, my breath hitching as I realized it was an old, rusted padlock attached to a heavy wooden door. The door looked ancient, worn by time and neglect. I knelt down, examining the lock. It was covered in rust, but there was a keyhole, perhaps a chance to open it. I rummaged through the nearby crates, searching for anything that could help. My fingers brushed against cold metal, and I pulled out a small, ornate key, dust covering its surface. It seemed out of place here, almost too delicate for this forgotten cellar. With trembling hands, I inserted the key into the lock, my heart racing. I turned it slowly, feeling the resistance before it clicked open. I hesitated, fear gripping me tightly, but the voice echoed in my mind. "You must hurry." With a deep breath, I pushed the door open, a groan escaping the hinges. The darkness beyond was thick, almost tangible. I stepped through, flashlight illuminating a narrow passage that seemed to stretch endlessly. The air was charged with an energy I couldn't explain, and I felt a presence looming behind me, just beyond the light. I turned quickly, but there was nothing there, only shadows and silence. I pressed on, every instinct screaming at me to turn back, but I had to know. The passage twisted and turned, the walls lined with strange symbols that pulsed faintly under the beam of my flashlight. They seemed to shift as I moved, words of an ancient language I couldn't decipher. A sense of dread washed over me. This place felt alive, as if it were a conduit for something far more sinister. Then I heard it, a faint whisper, barely audible, yet distinct. "Help me," it echoed through the passage, wrapping around me like a cold embrace. I quickened my pace, the urgency in that voice pushing me forward. My heart raced as I turned a corner, and what I saw froze me in my tracks. In a small chamber at the end of the passage, a figure sat bound to a stone altar, shrouded in darkness. I could barely make out the features, but those eyes were wide with fear, pleading for salvation. "Please," the voice cried, and I recognized it. It was the same voice from the phone. But before I could move, the air shifted again, and shadows swirled around the chamber, dark tendrils reaching out toward me. My heart thundered in my chest as I realized I was not alone. The very darkness seemed to congeal, forming into shapes that watched me, waiting. I had to make a choice. I could run, flee from the unseen horrors lurking in the shadows. Or I could confront whatever lay ahead, risking everything to save the person bound before me. With the echo of that desperate plea ringing in my ears, I stepped forward, ready to face whatever nightmares awaited me in this dark abyss. I took a shaky step forward, the beam of my flashlight cutting through the thick darkness like a knife. The figure bound to the altar squirmed slightly, and my heart raced as I tried to take in the scene before me. The chamber was small, the walls slick with moisture, and an oppressive weight hung in the air, thickening with every passing moment. The flickering light revealed intricate carvings on the altar, symbols that seemed to twist and writhe, pulsating with an otherworldly energy. "Please, you have to help me," the figure cried again, and I could finally see her face, pale, wide-eyed, with dark circles under her eyes. Her hair hung in tangled strands around her face, and her wrists were bound tightly with coarse rope that bit into her skin. Fear gripped me as I approached, my mind racing with questions. Who was she? How had she ended up here? "Who did this to you?" I asked, my voice trembling barely above a whisper. "I don't know," she gasped, her breath shallow. "They just took me." I was exploring the tunnels and then darkness. Her eyes darted around the room as if searching for something lurking in the shadows. "You have to hurry. They'll come back." I scanned the chamber, feeling the oppressive presence growing heavier. My instincts screamed at me to turn back to escape this nightmare, but the urgency in her voice kept me rooted to the spot. "What can I do?" I asked, desperate to help. "Free me," she pleaded, glancing at the ropes binding her. "Please, I can't stay here. I can feel them watching." Without thinking, I knelt beside the altar, examining the knots. They were tight, expertly tied. I fumbled with the ropes, my fingers trembling as I worked to free her. "What do you mean they're watching?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "I don't know what they are," she whispered, her eyes darting to the shadows again. "But I can feel them lurking. They're drawn to fear, to the darkness." As I struggled with the knots, I felt a sudden chill sweep through the chamber. It felt like a breath against my neck, and I froze, glancing over my shoulder. The shadows seemed to twist and shift, growing darker, more defined. A low whisper echoed around us, incoherent at first, but then forming words that sent shivers down my spine. "Turn back, leave this place before it's too late." I gritted my teeth and focused on the rope, forcing myself to ignore the voice. I managed to loosen one knot, and she let out a small gasp of relief. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely audible over the growing whispers. Suddenly the shadows thickened, swirling around the edges of the chamber, and I could sense something shifting in the darkness. My heart raced as I fumbled with the ropes, adrenaline coursing through me. "I just need to get you free." The whispers rose, overlapping into a chaotic cacophony, and I felt a weight pressing down on my chest. "Hurry," she cried, panic creeping into her voice. "They're coming." Just then the altar shook violently, and I staggered back. The symbols carved into the stone glowed with a sinister light, casting eerie shadows that danced along the walls. I felt an electric surge of energy coursing through the room, heightening my senses, making my skin crawl. "Help me," she screamed, and I returned to the ropes, desperately trying to free her. The knots were impossibly tight, and every second felt like an eternity. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, drowning out my thoughts. In a final surge of determination, I pulled at the last knot with all my strength. It finally gave way, and the ropes fell away, leaving her wrists free. She sat up, gasping for breath, but I could see the fear in her eyes as she turned to face the encroaching shadows. "They're here," she cried, and I felt a chill race down my spine. The shadows coalesced into dark figures, their shapes shifting, moving with a menacing grace. "Run!" I shouted, grabbing her hand and pulling her to her feet. We turned to flee down the passage, the shadows clawing at our heels, their whispers echoing in our minds. We sprinted back through the narrow corridor, the flashlight flickering as if it couldn't keep up with the intensity of the darkness surrounding us. I could hear their voices, now distinct and filled with malice. "You cannot escape, this is where you belong." "Keep going," I urged, adrenaline fueling my every step. My heart raced as I glanced over my shoulder, and the shadows seemed to close in on us, their forms taking on more defined features, twisted faces, hollow eyes, mouths that stretched into wide, silent screams. The passage opened up into the larger chamber, where I had first encountered the altar. I skidded to a halt, and she stumbled beside me, breathing heavily. "What do we do?" she gasped, panic evident in her voice. I glanced around the room, searching for an escape. The heavy wooden door loomed in the distance, but it felt miles away. I could sense the darkness creeping closer, its presence wrapping around us like a suffocating shroud. "Over there," I shouted, pointing to a narrow opening on the far side of the chamber. "We can hide." We darted toward it, squeezing through the tight space just as the shadows surged forward, their whispers rising to a deafening crescendo. I could feel the air shifting, cold tendrils brushing against my skin as we squeezed into the dark crevice. Once inside, I turned to face her. "What's your name?" I asked, breathless, my heart pounding in my chest. "Clara," she replied, her eyes wide with fear. I didn't think anyone would come for me. "We'll get out of this," I assured her, though I felt the doubt creeping in. I could hear the shadows swirling outside, their whispers now a low growl, filled with anger and frustration. Suddenly the shadows stopped. Silence enveloped us, thick and oppressive. My heart raced, and I exchanged a worried glance with Clara. "What's happening?" she whispered, her voice trembling. I pressed my ear against the cold stone, straining to listen. The whispers faded, but the air felt charged, electric with a tension that made my skin crawl. "I don't know," I admitted, fear creeping into my voice. Then, without warning, a cold breeze swept through the crevice, making me shiver. The shadows outside began to coalesce, forming into a single figure, more defined than before. It loomed before us, dark and terrifying, its eyes glowing like embers in the darkness. "Flee while you can," it hissed, its voice a guttural rasp that sent chills down my spine. You've meddled in affairs beyond your comprehension. Clara clutched my arm, her grip tight as we both backed against the stone wall, hearts pounding. The figure stepped closer, the shadows swirling around it like a dark cloak. You should not have come here. Now you must pay the price. Who are you? I demanded, my voice shaking but defiant. I am the keeper of this realm, the guardian of secrets best left undisturbed. You've disturbed the balance, it intoned, its voice echoing around us, resonating with a malevolent energy. Clara whispered, "What does it want?" Silence, the figure roared, and the darkness surged forward, pressing in on us. I felt a wave of panic wash over me, threatening to swallow me whole. I needed a plan, a way to escape. "We need to get to that door," I shouted to Clara, my voice firm despite the terror creeping in. "On three," I said, my heart racing. 1, 2, 3. We lunged forward, bursting from our hiding spot. The figure shrieked in rage as we dashed across the chamber, the shadows clawing at our heels. I could feel the darkness brushing against my skin, trying to pull me back, but I pressed on, adrenaline driving me forward. The heavy door was within reach, but it felt like a distant dream. Clara and I reached it simultaneously, and I fumbled for the handle. It was locked, the metal cold and unyielding beneath my fingers. "Push," I yelled, and we slammed against the door together. It creaked but held firm. The shadows surged forward, and I could sense the figure closing in behind us. With one last effort, I pushed against the door with all my strength. It gave way, swinging open with a loud groan, and we stumbled through, the blinding light of the outside world flooding over us. The shadows screeched in fury, but we didn't look back. We raced into the light, hearts pounding, as the door slammed shut behind us. The oppressive darkness was gone, replaced by the warm glow of the sun filtering through the trees. Breathless and shaken, we collapsed onto the grass, the world around us feeling surreal after the horrors we had just escaped. I looked at Clara, relief flooding through me. We made it. But as I glanced back at the house, I felt an unsettling chill creep up my spine. The door was now firmly shut, the shadows lingering just beyond the threshold, whispering secrets that would forever haunt me. "We're safe for now," I said, but doubt gnawed at me. What had we unleashed? The darkness was not gone, it was merely waiting, biding its time. And deep down, I knew our troubles were far from over. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the grassy expanse as Clara and I lay there, our hearts still racing. The world around us felt too peaceful, too ordinary, after the chaos we had just escaped. I glanced at her face pale and streaked with dirt. We were alive, but the sense of dread lingered like an unwelcome ghost, gnawing at the edges of my mind. What just happened?" Clara whispered, her voice trembling as she sat up, brushing her hair away from her face. "Was that real?" I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart. "I think so, but I don't understand it. Those shadows, that thing, it felt like we were in a nightmare." She nodded slowly, her eyes wide with fear. "What if it's not over? What if they follow us?" The thought sent a chill down my spine. I forced myself to stand, glancing around the clearing, trying to find something, anything, that would convince me we were safe. The old house loomed behind us, silent and ominous. It felt like a living entity, breathing in the twilight. We need to get away from here, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. We can't stay near that place. As we moved away from the house, I could feel the ground shifting beneath my feet. The weight of the shadows felt like a dark shroud, clinging to us even in the light. Clara walked close beside me, her breath quickening with every step we took away from that cursed place. We headed toward the campus, the familiar path winding through the trees. But as we walked, a strange unease settled over me. The chirping of birds faded into an unsettling silence, and I felt eyes upon us, watching, waiting. "Do you think anyone else knows about those tunnels?" Clara asked, glancing over her shoulder, her brow furrowed in concern. "I don't know," I replied, trying to shake off the dread that was tightening its grip. "But we can't tell anyone what we saw. They'll think we're crazy. Besides, what if they don't believe us?" She nodded, but I could see the worry etched on her face. "What about the girl? The one we found? We can't just leave her there." I hesitated. Clara's empathy was admirable, but the danger felt too close. "If we go back, we risk facing that thing again. We barely escaped." "But what if she's still in danger?" Clara insisted, her voice rising. "What if those shadows come for her again?" The urgency in her voice struck a chord within me. I remembered the panic in her eyes, the desperation that had fueled her cries. "Okay," I said finally, "but we have to be smart about it. We'll gather some people, make a plan. We can't go back in without backup." As we approached the main building, the sounds of campus life returned, and I felt a momentary sense of relief. Students milled about, laughing and talking, completely unaware of the darkness that lingered just beneath the surface. But my heart raced with the knowledge of what lay hidden. We hurried into the student center, the bustle of life surrounding us. I spotted a few friends at a table, and my stomach twisted at the thought of confiding in them. What if they dismissed us? What if they laughed? Clara took a deep breath. "We have to tell someone. We can't keep this to ourselves." I nodded, feeling the weight of her determination. "All right, but let's be careful about how we approach it." We joined our friends, and I quickly scanned the room for familiar faces. Lisa and Jake were animatedly discussing their latest project, and I felt a pang of nostalgia for the simplicity of our lives before this madness. "Hey, you guys," Clara said, her voice bright. "We need to talk." Lisa looked up, her brows knitting together in concern. "What's wrong?" "Remember those tunnels we heard about?" I began, my heart racing as I prepared to dive into the unknown. We went down there." "Are you serious?" Jake laughed, but the humor died when he saw the intensity in my eyes. "Wait, you're not joking." Clara lined in, her voice low. "We found something down there. Something dangerous." "What do you mean?" Lisa asked, her tone shifting to one of curiosity. "We found a girl," I explained, "but there were shadows. They were alive, and they wanted to hurt us." Jake exchanged a glance with Lisa, skepticism creeping back into his expression. "Shadows, like actual shadows." I could feel Clara's anxiety rise, but I pressed on. "It sounds crazy, I know. But you have to believe us. We need to go back and help her." "Wait a second," Lisa said, her brow furrowing. "Are you saying there's a girl trapped in those tunnels?" And there are what? Shadow monsters. Yes, Clara said, urgency in her voice. We have to do something. Jake shrugged, a hint of uncertainty in his eyes. Okay, even if we believe you, what do we do? Go back in there with flashlights and hope for the best. I could sense the reluctance in the group, but Clara wouldn't let it go. What if we gather more people? We could make a proper search party. We can't just leave her there. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed the weight of her words. Finally, Lisa spoke up. I guess it wouldn't hurt to check it out, but we should be careful. Maybe we can ask some of the campus security to help. As we brainstormed a plan, I felt a flicker of hope ignite within me. Maybe we could help Clara, maybe we could confront the shadows together. But as I looked around the room, the shadows seemed to stretch and twist just out of sight, a reminder that the darkness was still watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. The tension hung heavy as we finalized our plan, but I could feel a sense of determination growing among us. The thought of the girl trapped in the tunnels propelled me forward, igniting a fire within me that refused to be extinguished. Little did we know, the shadows were not the only thing we would have to confront. The echoes of the past had awakened, and soon we would learn just how deep the darkness ran. The campus felt alive as we gathered our friends. The sun dipped below the horizon, and the shadows lengthened, stretching across the ground like fingers reaching out to ensnare us. I could feel the weight of the impending night pressing down on my shoulders, a palpable tension in the air. We met at the old library, a stone building that had seen generations of students pass through its doors. The atmosphere inside was a mix of dust and aged paper, the scent evoking memories of late-night study sessions. Yet tonight, the familiar space felt foreign, tinged with apprehension. Clara stood at the front, her hands clenched together, her eyes alight with a mix of fear and determination. "All right, everyone, listen up," she began, her voice steady despite the fear swirling around us. "We're not just going down to explore, we're going to rescue a girl who might be in danger. We need to take this seriously." I could see the skepticism on some faces, particularly Jake's. He leaned back against a shelf, arms crossed, his expression guarded. "And what exactly do you expect to find down there?" "Shadow monsters. This sounds like a bad horror movie." "Trust me, Jake," I interjected, my voice firmer than I felt. "What we saw was real. Those shadows, they felt alive. We need to be prepared." As we discussed our plan, I could feel the adrenaline surging through me. The air buzzed with tension and uncertainty, but it also thrummed with purpose. We gathered flashlights, ropes, and anything that could serve as a makeshift weapon. I found myself taking charge, assigning roles, trying to instill confidence in everyone. "Clara and I will lead the way. Lisa, you and Jake keep an eye on the rear," I instructed. "If we hear anything strange, we regroup. No one goes off alone." The group nodded, but the uncertainty hung thick in the air. As night fully enveloped the campus, we made our way to the entrance of the tunnel, the cold earth beneath us echoing the fears that festered in our minds. The darkness ahead was absolute, swallowing the faint light of our flashlights. I took a deep breath, trying to quell the rising panic. With Clara beside me, we stepped into the mouth of the tunnel, the damp air wrapping around us like a shroud. The walls were rough and uneven, covered in moss and dampness that added to the sense of decay. Each footfall echoed, amplifying the ominous silence. I could feel my heart pounding, a steady rhythm of fear and determination. As we progressed deeper, the darkness seemed to close in, the air growing heavier with every step. Clara shone her flashlight ahead, illuminating the path, but the light barely pierced the shadows. I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see something lurking just beyond the reach of our beams. "Do you hear that?" Clara whispered suddenly, her voice trembling. I strained my ears and the sound cut through the silence, a distant echo, a faint whisper that seemed to beckon us deeper into the abyss. "What is it?" Lisa asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know," I admitted, a shiver running down my spine. "But it doesn't feel right." The whispers grew louder, weaving through the air like a dark melody, drawing us further into the depths. Clara's grip on my arm tightened, her knuckles pale against the glow of our flashlights. "What if it's a trap?" she murmured, her fear palpable. I didn't have an answer. My mind raced with possibilities, each one more terrifying than the last. Yet the thought of the girl, alone in the darkness, pushed me onward. "We have to keep moving," I urged, forcing myself to take a step forward. As we continued, the tunnel opened up into a larger chamber, its walls adorned with strange markings and symbols that seemed to dance in the flickering light. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me, a sickening sensation that something had happened here long ago, something sinister. "Look at these," Lisa whispered, pointing at the symbols. "They look ancient. Do you think they mean something?" Before I could respond, a sound shattered the air. A heavy thud reverberated through the chamber, followed by a low, guttural growl. We all froze, our breath hitching in our throats. The shadows around us shifted, and I felt a cold sweat trickle down my back. "Run!" I shouted, adrenaline kicking in as I turned, pulling Clara with me. The others followed suit, panic surging as we raced back the way we came. The growl echoed behind us, a dark promise of what lurked in the shadows. We stumbled through the tunnel, the once familiar path now a maze of terror. My heart raced, the sound of our footsteps mixing with the growls that chased us. The air grew heavier, as if the darkness itself was trying to envelop us. "Keep going," Clara shouted, her voice laced with desperation. "Don't look back." But the urge to turn and see what pursued us clawed at my mind. I could hear it, the rustling, the snapping of branches, an unseen entity gaining on us. We pushed through the darkness, driven by sheer instinct, each heartbeat pounding in my ears like a war drum. Finally, we reached the entrance, and I burst out into the night air, gasping for breath. The moon hung high above, a cold witness to our fear. We turned back, searching for our friends, but the shadows seemed to stretch longer, deeper, hungry for the light we had just escaped. "Where Jake?" Clara gasped, her eyes wide with horror. My stomach dropped. He was right behind us. Panic surged through me as I scanned the area, the reality of our situation settling in. We had left someone behind in the darkness, a sacrifice to the shadows. The whispers returned, wrapping around us like a shroud. My heart sank as I realized that our battle was far from over. The echoes of the past had awakened, and the true horrors of the tunnels were yet to reveal themselves. You made it to the end of the stories. That means it's the perfect time to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. And if you haven't already, leave a like and drop a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have a great time relaxing, and good night.